If you're tired of hearing the same old basic mindset and motivational fluff talk, you've come to the right show. Welcome to ProjectME with Tiffany Carter, the podcast, where we dish on everything from managing that crazy brain of yours to manifesting abundance to my straightforward, actionable steps that will make you major money online. Now, I'm not your typical multimillionaire entrepreneur. It takes a small village to keep my anxiety and depression in check. I'm inherently disorganized with an intense obsession with office supplies. Your girl here is a digital marketing content expert who's generated over $200 million in sales. I promise by tuning in twice a week, you will get a much needed refreshing dose of truth, clarity, and cash-making advice. Now let's get to it. What up, my people, my posse, my fellow crazies? I'm your host, Tiffany Carter, and this two-part exclusive interview is something that is not appropriate for children to be listening in on. And I want to give a heads up that this can be very triggering, especially those of you who are trauma survivors, are abuse survivors, know someone who is, or highly sensitive people, but I don't want you turning this off. This is the exact reason why the sex trafficking industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry and growing faster than anything else right now, is because people are either in so much shame and pain, we're not getting people to talk about it, which is why I share my story. But it's also because, being a former TV newscaster, news organizations don't like putting too much of this stuff in the news because it makes people feel icky and uncomfortable. They want to stay in denial and not see all the stuff that's going on. That yet another pediatrician was arrested for sexual abuse. Yet a priest, another teacher, that there's someone who lives in a nice affluent neighborhood that was running a full sex trafficking ring. People don't want to hear about this stuff. They want to live in a bubble because it's scary, it's horrifying, it's disgusting, it's gross. And so they don't put this stuff on the news, but they'll put, we captured a drug lord, or they'll put another fentanyl overdose, or that they just seized 5,000 pounds of cocaine, because we've been kind of desensitized to that. That's somehow become even more appropriate or even sensationalized through movies and TV shows and these cop shows. But there's not enough going on really sharing what actually is going on in this world, on your freaking street, in our school systems, inside of churches, in every single country, of what the world doesn't know about sexual predators and the multi-billion-dollar sex trafficking industry. And it took me 4 years to get this interview. This is really, I don't even want to call him a friend. This is as close to family as I have. We're only referring to him by first name for his own protection. He has been in the world of law enforcement and specifically sex crimes for 25 years. He's an award-winning U.S. Marshal and sex crimes expert, also a behavioral specialist. And he has arrested everyone from celebrities, music artists, high-powered billionaires, very well-known CEOs, to a third-grade teacher, to a pediatrician, to priests, to an accountant, to a minor league football coach. I mean, you name it, he's arrested it. And we have to protect him because there's a lot of people, if they knew where he was, would want him dead, as these people are being released out of prison by the dozens, and they're being released early, which is a whole nother story for another time and is deeply scary and disturbing. But it took me 4 years, even though he trusts me with his life, to get him to come on. Detective Steve also saved my life. I was very fresh into thawing out from all of the years of abuse that occurred with me. I was sex trafficked. I was pimped out. If you guys want to hear more of my story, I've linked another episode in here where I share more of my story, both on my podcast and on another podcast where you can hear more about that. But I met him through an outpatient facility that I was in for female survivors of sexual assault and sexual abuse. And these were horrifying cases. There was a woman in there who was truly being sexually assaulted nightly by her own husband. And her own husband was someone who was high up in the legal system. And so it was very messy, and people didn't believe her because they couldn't possibly believe that a spouse, someone who's married, could be assaulted by their husband. There was a girl in there I share about in the episode where I'll never forget, where it was her own father and he'd been doing it since she was born. And this is some of the stuff that I'm telling you is triggering. There is far more infant, terrible, despicable, just, I don't even have the right words for it, abuse than you even want to imagine, but you guys need to hear this. Because this, like I said, this is you doing a service of listening to this episode, because with awareness, we can create change, and we can also help prevent more crimes from occurring by being more alert and aware of our surroundings. So what I'm going to do for this episode, Steve and I are very big supporters of Children of the Night, which is a beautiful nonprofit who helps save women and children from sex trafficking and helps rehabilitate them with therapy, jobs, medical care, and attention, have safe houses. Steve helped set up this nonprofit as a consultant early on, one of many beautiful pieces of public service that this man has done. And so for every written review of this 2-part exclusive interview that you do on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I am personally going to donate $25 to Children of the Night. So all you need to do is leave a written review of the show. You can just put your first name. If you don't want your last name in there, that's fine. Or your Instagram handle in the review. Take a screenshot of it and DM me on Instagram. You can also email us at support@ProjectME with Tiffany. If you are not an Instagram person, that's fine. Just so I see that you've done the review. But even if you don't take a screenshot and send it to me, we're going to count up the reviews and I'll be donating based on that. So make sure you leave a review. It must be written. If you don't know how to leave an Apple Podcast review, it's something really simple to Google. You can also leave a review on Spotify. If you've already left me a review previously, thank you so much. On Apple, then leave a review on Spotify, and we'll be counting those as well. But predominantly, I'm really wanting to drive you guys to Apple, but you can do Apple and Spotify. You can do both, and I'll count both. So $25 for every review of this exclusive 2-part interview. And again, I'm here for you. After this brings up stuff for you, this brings up frozen memories for you, you're going to hear live in real time from me, a survivor, what our brains do with trauma. I buried something that I truly had zero recollection of, and it came up during the episode, and that Steve reminded me of, and I literally had no memory of it. It was still so traumatizing, even many years after the fact. I restuffed it, and it's just incredible the power of what our minds do and how we dissociate. So this episode might bring up some stuff for you, and just trust that it was supposed to come up because you're ready to thaw out in that area, and you can absolutely DM me on Instagram as a fellow survivor. I'm well aware by publishing this episode, I know that I'm also doing my duty to hold space for you. I'm obviously not a therapist or anything like that, but I can hold space as a fellow survivor. So let's get into this part 1, what the world doesn't know about sexual predators and the multi-billion-dollar sex trafficking industry, with guest Detective Steve, award-winning U.S. Marshal, sex crimes expert, and truly one of the most important people in my entire life. Period. End of story. One of the most incredible things about you, Steve, is that I've had the privilege as a survivor of, I would call extreme sex crimes, of being sexually abused from ages 11 to 21, also having been raped at 15 and then assaulted again later in my 20s and early 30s. I've had the privilege, not just of you like being my friend and my mentor, but I've had the privilege of being able to have access to someone who actually interacts with these motherfuckers, someone who actually arrests them, interviews them, goes and sees the families. You talk to the victims very fresh right after it. You were one of the pivotal people that helped teach other law enforcement how to interact with victims of sex crimes when you're getting a rape kit and all that stuff, because people didn't know how to do that. And I want to share and I want to ask you some of the questions that you've already answered for me personally, but that I know fellow survivors would love to hear. And it's like really healing. And I would say one of the top questions is, do these guys, and I know everyone's different, but do these guys, and it's not just guys, I know it's these guys, these women, these sex offenders, these perpetrators, these sociopaths, do they exhibit any level of remorse for the acts that they've done and the harm they've done on people?
The ones that are really violent are the ones that are on a spree every other week, every month, or whatever they're attacking. Those are the ones that minimize everything because they're smarter than me. And they want to minimize everything in their conversation to minimize the fact that they were caught and to minimize what continues.
And what do they think they're going to get out of minimizing their crimes?
One is they hopefully will dismiss, or we will not, the DA will dismiss, or somebody will not follow up on the crime enough. Or they will gain some sympathy from us as not being their fault as it was somebody else's fault.
So kind of like, give me if you can recall an example or something you heard all the time of them deflecting blame, or almost, it sounds like what you're saying is they do blame shifting.
It's blame shifting and minimizing the actions that occurred. No, that didn't happen like that. Or there wasn't things like that there. This is not, no, I would never hurt somebody like that. And especially when it comes to children, I will never hurt a child.
Wow. And even when you presented these people with like photos or videos or their laptop that was filled with child porn or whatever, you put evidence in front of their face, would they still play that game with you?
It depends on how you present it. There's two things. One is the conversation. And the conversation is, tell me about yourself. Tell me what's going on. Do you understand why you're here? Basic, like background, basic, just history. It's kind of an idea to get somebody to watch what they're doing. So I can watch how they're reacting to simple questions. And then that's just an interaction. It's not an interrogation. It's an interview. It's so I can evaluate how this person presents himself and what he thinks he already has over us, or what he thinks he can get past us. So at that point, there's a point where I stop and I'm going to take a break. And I will say something that is a cliffhanger. Like I will say, will there be any reason that I will find physical evidence of this crime with you involved? And I have our lab techs and I have our other people here. I'm going to go talk to them. So I'll be back in a minute, but think about that. And I watch that reaction as the cliffhanger action. What may he find? What will it be? What will I do? And then we go from there and start building up a little bit more and a little bit more when I come in on the interrogation. Well, I found a little bit of this, or was there any reason why I would find your fingerprints there? Or stuff like that. I mean,
when it comes to specific like sex crimes of any kind, by the time you arrested them by the time you were able to get them in the station and interview them? Was most of your job with these people trying to get them to confess in some way? Like, did you already know when you interacted with them that they absolutely did this? Or were you not sure and you guys were still trying to figure out who is the person who did this string of rapes, or who is the person in charge of this pedophile ring?
I can't say 100% every time, but I can say that we were pretty damn close. And again, it depends on who I'm talking to and how they present themselves from the first contact. First contact's important. First contact is like, oh shit, I got caught, or oh shit, here I am. And if that's that oh shit that I start to see or feel, that's what I have to build off of. And then I have to figure out how they want to present themselves and how they want to minimize or deny these actions. And how do I work myself around that?
I remember you told me that there are some of these criminals who actually get off on almost like they want to like brag of their escapades.
I'll tell you a short story on that, and it'll give you an idea. So I had a serial child molester that was working all of Southern California and had worked in our city and was working in other cities. And I couldn't find the correlation to the other cities. Couldn't understand why. And I get a call from patrol saying, hey, this guy was, we'll call him the waterman. And he'd follow little girls home and knock on their door and say, hi, are your parents here? No, my parents aren't here. I'm from the water department. I'm here to check your water to see if there's any problems. Go in, check the water, molest the child. So I get a call, and I already knew about this going on. I actually had a meeting with the detectives that had all had these crimes in their area. I had that meeting at my house. And so we all got to know each other and said, hey, we have something going on. None of us have any real evidence of this. So we kind of need to get together and start working together instead of just having teletypes go out. I need to know what your gut feelings are. I need to know what the victims were like. So I'm sitting at my desk, I get a call from patrol. Patrol says, hey, I got a guy out here that was knocking on the door where a little girl was, saying he's here to check the water. And he kind of rushed her, and she hid in the closet and screamed, and he left. But we got him. I said, okay, hold him. Do not let him move. So I went out and I hooked him up and brought him in, and I let him sit. For a good hour, hour and a half. And I called these detectives, and I got one in particular, and I says, hey, he had the most victims. I says, get your ass to my department now. He was a young detective, a new guy. So to make a long story short and kind of address your issue. So I got him to start talking, and the guy was talking, and he realized that, or he thought I had all the information, but he didn't know I had all the other departments. So during this conversation that lasted probably close to 4 hours with breaks, it's a small interview room. I'm sitting across from him. Suspect is sitting next to the other detective. Now, the other detective is fairly new, and he was allowing me to continue, but asking a couple of questions about his area. And the suspect stood up and was going to tell him to sit his ass down. And then the other detective stood up, and the suspect moved towards the other detective. And the detective looked at me, and I said, don't. I didn't say it. I just shook my head. No, don't. Knock him on his ass. And the guy got up next to him and says, had a heart on.
Oh my God.
And this new detective was freaking out. And he got a hard on talking about what he had done to these girls. And then he admitted to doing it to the girls in his city. And then we went down this whole pattern of things where he had done it multiple places. But we tried to figure out what it was. Now, this guy was worth millions of dollars.
So would you say this is someone, because I used to be, you guys, really obsessed with going, Steve, that person's a pedophile, right? That person's a pedophile, right? Was this someone that you would look at and be like, this is a creepy dude, or no?
Yes, but I had him in that situation.
Right, but I'm saying like conventionally at the grocery store or something.
Depends on his actions, but probably not.
And you said he's a millionaire on top of it.
Millionaire, a 10 for a girlfriend, had his own private plane, had everything.
Oh, shit.
So when he started basically trying to masturbate against the detective, he was caught. As far as I was concerned, I had him in everything. And when we ended the interview after 6 or 7 hours, and I looked at him and I said, thank you for your cooperation. We'll verify some of this information, but we already have some of this information. But what I had was his intent, that he was doing it deliberately, that the locations he was going to was because there was gambling places in those cities. And he's a gambler, and he was losing money gambling. So when he lost money from gambling, he had to act out. And he'd drive in the areas which he thought were low income. And these were low incomes in the other areas where it was a Hispanic type ghetto area. Mm-hmm. I don't want to use the word ghetto, but low income.
Well,
area.
It's like the barrio, yeah.
Right. And the parents were working and the kids were home. They were easy targets. So sometimes we know some things, but when you actually finally get them to the point to tell you the real reasons why and how it not only he justified it in his own way, and that by doing so, he thought by cooperating, he would be able to get off and get some lenient time.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a funny character. He actually ended up saying, hey, do you want me to do videos for you for training? So we can tell people, future cops, what to look out for.
Wow. Like it was almost like there was like a sexual deviancy at even doing that probably too.
Sure, it was to get off because he wanted to become famous. I mean, some of these people want to become famous.
Do you think that, I mean, I know it's case by case basis, but do you think like in this guy's case, Waterman's case, that there was a subconscious part of him that was drowning in his gambling addiction and this pedophile addiction that he wanted to get caught?
Part of it, I think, was a relief that he did get caught. But then he wanted to turn it around, that he was so good that he had cops all over this Southern California or the area that had no idea what he did. And
he kind of liked knowing that.
I'm smarter.
Mm-hmm. Then it turns into something else. You know, well, you said.
I'll give you a little example at the end. So we're getting ready to go to preliminary hearing, and these girls are young girls. And in court, we have a situation dealing with certain age groups that you can't accept their testimony because they can't make up this. It's hard to have them go through a basic question and answering to tell the difference between a truth and a lie.
Is this, when you say very young, are you talking like under 6?
Yes.
Wow.
Some that young and some that old. So, you know, again, mind games. You play mind games with people and you play it for perceptions. You play how people will look at him and how he looks at himself and how the court looks at him and all this. So all these little girls, must have been 12, 13, or 14 that showed up to court. Before they came, I said, make sure they come in their Quinceañera dress or their best dresses that they have in the family. And they all showed up with these colorful Hispanic dresses. And all were prim and proper and looked good. The defense attorney walked outside and saw him and said, holy shit. And then went back in and talked to the suspect, who then immediately agreed to start taking plea deals.
Why did you have them do that?
Because that just shows how smart they are and how cute they are. I wanted that to come off, that these little girls are cute little girls, that they did not deserve to be put into this situation.
Wow. So these are some little behavioral things that, with all your experience, you've learned can really help nail the perpetrator.
Sure, because he has his perception of how they are. His perception is that they're just a victim. They're just something. They're not real. And when it becomes real and visibly real to the court, that they have to realize that, whoops, it's not what I think, it's what the judge or the jury thinks. And when you are at that point, you better start making some deals.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see 12 precious little girls in cute little dresses, little sweet dresses. It's like, oh, God, we're really screwed.
Every one of those girls were approached by attorneys on this floor. They were all outside the courtroom. People would come up, hi, you guys look so cute. You're so nice. And just to hear that, was enough for the defense attorneys. I got to go talk to this guy.
You made a clear point about saying this guy went after a community and kids that were easy targets. And
I don't want to say easy targets, but they are easy targets.
Well, they're more vulnerable people. I mean, right. I want to have a frank conversation.
Trusting too. Actually, more trusting than some people are.
Okay, but I like where you're going with that.
Authority has now come to my door.
Okay, so let's go into that and what you mean by that, and not just with kids as well, but also, I mean, I listen to myself as a survivor. See, I have a block where I go, I don't think I was a kid when what happened to me, and I was fucking 11. I was like, well, with kids and adults, and I was like, and I almost said like me, and it was like, wait a second, I was a fucking kid too. But what are some clear setups where, and I'm not saying this to blame like the parents necessarily or the families, although some of these fucking parents, like mine, deserve to be held accountable for it. What makes them more susceptible? What makes them more vulnerable to these types of perpetrators?
Living in a world where authority is important, that you look at people that are supposedly in authority and don't want to make waves. Let's just hypothetically say that these people were in the country illegal.
And so the kids are taught be very respectful to,
in authority.
Wow. Okay.
So that was an interesting case. The police officer tried to hit me 3 or 4 times after the interview for letting me allow the guy to masturbate on him or close to him. But he later in life called me up and said, I learned so much from that interview and how to talk to people that I will never forget this. And he said, thank you. And he said, I don't know where I'm going to go in my career, but this will always be with me.
Wow. Let's take a look at, because I feel we can use me as an example because I'm comfortable with it. And you're obviously really familiar with my story. And again, I'm going in the weeds with this, you guys, because I know how many of you are survivors, or you might think you're a survivor. You're not sure if it really happened, or what made me, for example, vulnerable. Because I was, I'm not in the country illegally. I was raised wealthy. So this was a wealthy household. I'm white. I'm privileged. What made me vulnerable? Because I know a lot of these perpetrators.
Right off the bat, I'll tell you.
What?
Right off the bat is that, and even to this day, you try to do it. You were ingrained from a child up to please your elders. Always please.
Or else.
Whatever they say is the right thing, or whatever actions take place are the right thing. And what actions took place were ignored. And it didn't seem to care. So you went on this self, I don't know what it is, but in yourself, you knew these were wrong. But you didn't know how or why you were being subjected to these things with parents knowing. So it was one of those things where you do what your parents tell you to do because it's the right thing to do.
You know that my mom not only was aware of this, but involved in setting up these circumstances and dates. Like she pimped me out. Why do you feel these when parents either are are the actual sex offender or encourage it or, pimp their kids out or get their kids in like these, sex rings and stuff like that? Is it because when you've seen it, is it because the parent themselves were abused?
It could be, but it could also be something new, something in their life that they have this power now. And it feels so good to have this. And as a result of it, the perpetrators or the suspects become close to them. And the need or the desire to want to have people that are, but in their eyes, good people to have as friends.
So in order to, I guess, get this person locked into your grasp and control this person, you're basically giving them something that they want.
Yes.
So this goes to like Jeffrey Epstein, and Steve was not involved in this case whatsoever. I want to make that clear. But with Jeffrey,
I wouldn't be alive if I was.
Oh, you were?
No, I said I probably wouldn't be alive if I was.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't think you would be. So with Epstein, this was multifaceted because initially, right, he's this super rich guy in Palm Beach, Florida, and he went after his targets were people who were less fortunate, were in a neighboring city of West Palm Beach, Florida. Why do so many of these perpetrators go after people who are less fortunate financially?
Well, it's what you provide for them. And then there's a time that you have to say, if I'm going to give you all this stuff, I need a little bit of something back. And kids are naturally affectionate, especially when they're starting to get some of the things they like. And I don't mean sexually affectionate. I mean, they're just affectionate. And that's how some things grow. And when they grow, that's when he takes advantage of it. But I think there was at a point where he didn't give a shit and was just taking the teenings, the middle teens, and just taking them and using and abusing them to the best of their ability.
But he also, the twofold is, it wasn't just to satisfy his pedophile, disgusting habit. It was also to control all of these major public figures in which this fucking black book we're apparently never going to see because it's been sealed again, allegedly people like Bill Gates, were on this list. Bill Clinton, again, allegedly. So do you think he got off also on knowing he set these people up, and that now he videotaped them or something? He's got so much dirt on them. Now they're in his pocket.
Oh, I think absolutely right. Yeah. And, once some of these people feel that they're free of this type of prosecution or whatever could have occurred, they're not free, and he has control over them now, and control to an extent to where he can ask for the favors that most people could never ask for. And
the money and the private planes and God knows what. Anything, really.
Keeps him in his lifestyle that he's happy to be at. And also, it's that thought when you start getting up to those people, is that we're above the law.
Is that why we're seeing? I think it's always been there because you've told me this. I mean, you've arrested doctors, lawyers, celebrities, athletes. I mean, is there something when people get like really rich and successful that there seems to be more of these people that do these sexually deviant acts?
Well, I think it's always buried, but then they start having all this stuff thrown at them. And then they start saying, well, this is not bad. And nothing ever happened after the first one. Nothing's going to happen after the second one. We're so clear on this. We're at a different level than the regular people. And the law doesn't touch us. And to be perfectly honest with you, it's now probably speculatively, 50 to 100% different than it was 10 years ago, because of we now have more sexual slaves, sexual people than we've ever had. And if you go to certain countries and certain locations, there are actual bars or clubs that are designated to deal with sex trafficking.
Yep, I went into one by accident in Thailand.
Yeah.
And I will certainly never visit that city again. And it was horrifying. And there were literal holes in the wall for men to use them. I'll put it to you like that.
Yeah. And there are certain areas that, and I have never verified this, but this is what I'm hearing, that a lot of these sex trafficking kids and adults or young adults, depends on what your proclivity is in sex, what really turns you on. They use it. And they use these kids to these most deviant things you could ever think of, and young humans. And then they're either thrown away as trash, literally, or they survive as long as they're in use.
Why do you feel sex trafficking is at an all-time high? I mean, people aren't aware. This is as big of an industry. And I call it an industry. It is an industry. It's as big as the drug industry.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that it's just keeps growing and it's more than ever, even though we have all this modern technology, we have more ways to catch people with DNA or whatever faster. We have cameras fucking everywhere. Why is it more than ever?
It becomes a political thing as far as I'm concerned. I don't think anybody cares anymore. They're more concerned on other stuff. You don't hear anybody jumping up and down about the sexual exploitation or the fact that certain kids are taken across the border and used as sex slaves. You don't hear any of this, and it's not discussed. But half these people that come across the border that have to use coyotes that are cartel coyotes, the number, I can't remember what the exact number is, but 1 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 females will be raped multiple times on the way across, or sold or used.
Who is the customer, right? To have a business, whether it's illegal drugs or sex trafficking, you have to have a product that someone wants or a service, and you have to have a customer. Who are most of these customers that are paying for these minors to use them as slaves or use them and abuse them? Who are these people?
Well, first, the ones that will bring money are the ones that are sold out of the country. They're sold to other countries. They're sold to other people that have very, very large amounts of money and want to have their own little, harem or home little situation. They're sold. The other ones just go into a regular brothel or bar type situation where it's not people with a lot of money. It's just people that just don't give a shit.
There's a pedigree. It's these are the in demand, which, listen, you guys, this is not me making this up. These are actual facts that are out there. The highest in demand are the blonde hair, blue eyed.
Yeah, that's one of the highest in demands, but everybody has their own, especially if you have money. If you have money and everybody has their own special needs and desires,
you can get whatever you want.
What they think is what is best for that really gets them off. They'll go looking for it. I mean, I just heard something where there are people are, pardon my French, fucked up. There are people that want to have sex with people with no arms or no legs. There's people that want to have all this control and other stuff over the child. Those things happen. And they happen without much fanfare, because once the child's used, the child's gone, and the child's been sold. It has no history. Child sold has no history, and after they are used up, they're gone.
And again, you've mentioned these are people, the ones who are, paying these rings or paying to receive this human child. You said they have a lot of money, and in general, what comes with money is power. Why?
Power.
Why is it that's a common theme, that they have money?
But here's the thing. Our definition of money may be different than other people's definition of money. So power and fear come in too. I'm reaching for this branch, but the only way I can get to this branch is I have to go, trust this person to get me there. So I have to jump through a few hoops. Well, a few hoops turn into 100 hoops. And the fear of getting hurt, or the fear of family getting hurt, people that they love getting hurt, is big. And then also the promise. The promise is important. I'll put up with this as long as I get to the end.
And you're saying this from the perspective of the victim.
Yes.
And what are they thinking happens at the end for them?
They get to live the life they want to live, or have desired their whole life.
And these are for the victims that end up getting in these through a quote unquote boyfriend, through the internet, things like that.
All sorts of different ways now. It's become so prevalent in different ways. It's ridiculous.
In your career, are most of the perpetrators of sex crimes, are they people who are normally friends or family members of the victim, or are they typically strangers, or is it a mix?
It's a mix, but I'd say primarily it's friends or relatives.
Do you believe that there are certain households that are more susceptible for that to occur in the house?
That's kind of generalizing. It's kind of hard to say that just because you live this type of lifestyle or live something like that, that you can be marked into this book as being that type of thing.
Right, but I'm sure you've seen some common themes, though.
Common themes are the mentality. It's the mentality where control is the most important thing. And when you have control from a very early age, you can do what you damn well want. No one ever says a word.
In these homes where let's say it's the father who's the perpetrator, what is the psychology? Why would a father be doing this to his own child? That's
a tough answer.
Is it easy access?
Of course, it's always easy access and control. But there's a lot of things that go on there. It's the thrill of not getting caught. It's all sorts of things. I'll give you an example that was mind-blowing when I heard it, and I was there. So back in the days when I was a young detective, there was another detective who worked sex crimes because she was female. And they always felt that a female was always better to address another female. So she had a case involving a high school girl, freshman or sophomore, who was at the high school, and after PE was in the gym taking a shower, and the girls were talking about how their boyfriends want blowjobs and all that bit. And she looked at one of the girls, and they were all saying how terrible it was. And she looked at one of the girls and said, hell, I give my dad a blowjob every day. So, okay. She goes out and interviews the girl. She comes back, and I look at her and say, what'd you come up with? She goes, yeah, all that's true, but she doesn't want to prosecute. I said, what? So that has nothing to do with it. fuck that. And so I yelled at her across the detective bay, which probably wasn't appropriate. And then there was 3 or 4 other detectives standing there looking at this. And I said, I'm going out to arrest him right now. And I want somebody to come and take the child into custody so I can interview her more thoroughly. And so we went out and did that. And he just thought, that's just every family day life. And so
Like this was a normal thing to do?
Yes.
Was it an act, or do you believe he really felt that way?
It justified itself to him that way. And the girl had no idea that it was doing anything wrong. She didn't, give it a second thought. When she looked at the other girls and said, I get my dad blowjob every night. It was like, okay. And yeah, don't you guys do that? And that was her whole belief in the whole thing. She didn't recognize what was going on. And yeah, he went to jail. But
did she end up, I don't know what the right terms are, but like testifying, or was she refusing to?
No, the dad didn't want to take it to trial. He pled guilty. So, and most of the time, there's a long process in dealing with victims. There's a real long process. And your first few minutes of that interview is very important. And you have to hopefully establish some kind of a trust and an understanding of what my goal is and what my goal is for you. And you hope that you get that point.
Well, that's what made you so incredible at your job. And I know you worked really hard on trying to teach that, to other detectives and other officers. And I know you wanted that taught, that should be taught heavily in the police academy. I don't know if it is.
Because it becomes embarrassing. I mean, I'll give you an example. Certain sex crimes, most vaginal penetration sex crimes, are the act of vaginal penetration. But you have to go beyond that. This is like it's not playing a game, it's using the law. And the law says every time you part the lips is a crime. So how many times did they do this? So when you're up to 8, 10, 12, 14, they're all counts, separate individual counts that are, when you add up the years, you're talking 60, 70 years of time. And if you start using those things in your interview and get that information and then start cooperating it a little bit with the suspect, because now you have more things to say to the suspect. And even suspects will admit, yeah, maybe 4, 5, 6 times, maybe more. They'll admit it after they've got to that point. But now they're looking at life sentences, basically. And that's the hard part to teach people when you're talking to them. Interviews, cops, when you're talking to cops to do an interview, it's hard for them to take that step farther. They think they've reached a step that is established.
They think it's enough. It's enough that it was digital penetration one time.
Right. But they didn't go through it. So the first time he put his fingers between my lips, the second time he stuck his fingers in, and he kept doing it over and over and over again. Well, how many times do you think, And then he used his dick, and he used to rub it up and down and do all this. And I'm sorry I'm talking like this, but these are things that you kind of have to have that trust with your victim to give you that information. And part of it is establishing to them the importance of this information and how it becomes important for this case, for her to see the justice of this case, that she wasn't wrong, and that we're actually working to put this person away from other victims.
When you have gone into families where it's a sibling who has done this act, or an uncle, and the parents or no one else in the family believes them, like the minor has said, my uncle touched my boobs or whatever, or my brother, my cousin did this, and no one believes them. I mean, I know for myself going through that what that does to the victim, what that does to the survivor. Why do you think that is so common in families for it to just go into pure denial and to just basically that's the first line of where someone gets the victim to shut up?
Oh, well, yeah, but I'm not doing my interviews in front of the family. I let the family come to me. I don't.
But I mean, it doesn't even.
No, the family.
But it can take decades, if ever, to get to you because no one is believing.
Correct.
The person in the family. Why don't they believe?
Because it's a reflection on them. The reflection comes back to them. It's how other people perceive them.
Because now people are going to go, I'm a negligent parent or
something. It's their standing. And also, you know, some people know that it's bad and know what's going on, but don't ever want to admit that they knew it.
That was my next question. And given that, and you guys probably don't know this, and I won't say what it stands for because I don't know if Steve wants me to, but I know Steve through an incredible organization called SART. And that's how we met like 1,000 years ago, like 20 years ago. And I was in basically like an intensive outpatient that was, it was free or low cost. It was a beautiful service to the community for victims of, you know, sexual abuse, sexual trauma, sexual assault. And so it was like intensive group therapy, art therapy. And I learned a lot, and my eyes were very open by listening to the other fellow victims who I was in there. And there's this one girl I will never forget. I'll never forget her. Wow. Just like I know you have people you've interacted with in your career, you'll never forget. Her dad was the perpetrator. And she was in there because she was trying to basically get the guts to go to even like do anything about it. For whatever reason, he was not getting arrested. He wasn't getting arrested. I don't know all of the details. Obviously, they had to report it because you're forced to report stuff like this. But like she had a car and it had stickers all over it that was "My Princessa." And that was the dad.
Yep.
She had a tattoo on her arm that said "My Princessa," that he made her get, like, "You're mine." And her mom absolutely knew. It got to a point where he even was doing things in the master. You're not supposed to say master anymore, so forgive me, you guys. I don't know what the fuck we're supposed to call it. Thank you. The owner's suite. That sounds ridiculous. The owner's suite room. Anyway, the bedroom with the wife in the bed pretending, quote unquote, she's asleep. So the mom was totally aware this was going on, not for like years. Why would a mother of their own flesh and blood turn the other way when their husband is doing atrocious acts?
It can be lots of reasons, but a lot of it just breaks down to, okay, one reason would be because she grew up that way. Two could be that, why would I want to give up what I have here? It would just show everybody what a failure I am. And all these other things come into your own personal self-esteem and your own personal belief. And it depends on a lot of things that are going through their heads. And they'll deny because being knowledgeable brings them into being an active part of this. And I don't want to be an active part of this and have my whole life ruined. And
it's selfish.
Oh, well, of course it's selfish.
I'm willing to have my child continue to suffer abuse so I can be more, quote unquote, comfortable.
Well, yeah, that's putting it into real basics, but there's all sorts of things that go on in their heads. You know, I don't want the rest of the family to think that I'm this or that this thing actually occurred and I was there. There's no way I'm that type of person. And that's kind of that. it's a crazy set of circumstances, when you start seeing that sort of stuff, and how do you proceed and how do you not proceed? And you have to be real careful on how you proceed to be able to provide something to the victim. And, sometimes in cases like that, the victim comes forward way too late to come up with some physical evidence. And now it becomes, and he said, she said, and I hate to say that, but you do everything you can to get past that and try to come up with something. And sometimes we don't. But then the point is, we don't abandon the victim. The victim still needs to realize that everything she's doing is right. And because she's doing it right doesn't mean that we can also proceed sometimes.
What do you think about how modern technology has impacted this specific sector of the law? Like when we're looking at sex crimes in general, do you feel that modern technology has absolutely helped, or do you think it's exacerbated this?
It's exacerbated the hell out of it. You go back over 20 years, 30 years ago when the internet was just starting to going, and God bless AOL. AOL had all their little chat rooms and all that bit. And before Chris Hansen on NBC decided to do these things on TV, we were...
Oh, that's right. That was the Dateline thing, right?
Right. To Catch a Predator.
Yep.
And I used to teach this class. I could sit down and go into an AOL chat room and put Home Alone or Looking for Friends, skip school. And I'll guarantee you that it was demonstrated. I could demonstrate it all the time, that within 10 to 15 minutes, I start getting somebody that was hitting on me. And I had a partner that worked at another agency, and we did this on a regular basis where we'd hook somebody within 10 minutes of the conversation and have a meet set up within 20 and roll out there and contact them. And most of the time when you contact them, you get somewhat of an admission or a confession, and then you take their goddamn computers and everything else and see what else they have. And you're going to find all sorts of stuff. It's changed some. Television made those rooms disappear, but they're still there. They're on what they want to call the dark web or private rooms or whatever, but they're still there. The sale to kids still go on online. Everything's absolutely there. When you talk about your victim that was living with, a mom and dad and all these things are going on, if this had been a time when there was actually computers, it would not be unusual for us to find a computer diary or pictures that he uses to relive and to rebuild up off of this, and
so in that sense, technology can be helpful.
Correct. Very much so.
But it's also but technology has also fueled this industry, so to speak, as well.
Sure. You look at, these people that would come on TV and, I just wanted to warn her. I'm just coming to warn her. But when you start looking at all the rest of the texts and everything that was there, which they would sometimes show, you see exactly what their intentions are. And, they're not going to tell you what their intentions are, but we already have it on text. We have it in the computer. We have all this other stuff. And that speaks thousands of words as to their intent.
Are majority of the people, if we were to make a pie chart of, and I know it's specific to your career, but I mean, you worked a lot of federal cases. Are a majority of the criminals that you came in contact with, were they regular folk, with professional jobs and owned companies and were accountants and teachers? Or were they derelicts on the street?
Every profession you can name. I've had priests. I've had CEOs of major corporations. I've had pilots with 25 years of being main pilots on airplanes. I've had, restaurant owners, restaurant workers. I've had everybody there. And people say, well, how do you determine who's the bad guy? And what do you sense? Why do you think they did this? And, I'm not a psychologist, and I'm not one that's going to go into it a lot. We're trained that way, but my standard answer is always the same. These are just fucked up people, and that just kind of minimizes it. But they're just fucked up people.
But that answer that because you know me, I'm always, I've always asked you, but why, but why, but why, and Steve's famous response is, it's not always black and white. He's like, and it's, but as a survivor myself, it's like, we want to know in specifics, why would someone do something so awful? And then we want to know, like, do they ever feel bad or live with like tortured regret or remorse? And the third thing is, like, can you spot these predatory people? Are there tells that we can look for?
Being remorseful itself, I mean, they're remorseful in the way that they figure by showing remorse now, it minimizes things. I didn't know what I was doing. I was going through some hard times. I was drinking. I was smoking. I was doing all these things. I was taking these drugs and all this other stuff, and I really don't know what I was doing. And I really don't think I would ever do that again due to my ability now to recognize how screwed up I was. That doesn't mean anything. They knew. They knew what they were doing at the time. Micro expressions or things you see in the past, you can see in front of you, and that's the thing of watching what's going on around you. If you look at just basic things for the last 30 or 40 years, if someone interjects themselves into your child life, a lot of parents don't care. A lot of parents say, oh, that's great. They're making friends or somebody's teaching them something.
Right. Like this person must really care.
Yeah, and they're gonna teach them some things and help them out and help them mature and become a better person. Well, and all the time, all the other main goals are to do whatever they want to do to the girl or boy. And
what would you say to parents who are listening, who have a kid, or it could be a niece or nephew who has been assaulted in some way or abused in some way, or maybe they themselves have and want to do something about it, meaning want to go to the authorities about it? What would you suggest they do? Because as you know, a lot of times we victims don't speak up right when the event occurs for a gazillion different reasons. And as you guys have seen with the whole Bill Cosby thing, and what's the other creep's name? R. Kelly, or decades later, these victims are coming forward.
What did R. Kelly do that got him in trouble?
What did he do to get him in trouble? Oh, that's how. So that's how he finally got caught, was
the evidence to justify it.
It wasn't that, because otherwise it was all he said, she said.
I don't like to use those words. Like to use those words. It's how much investigation you can put in to pull things out. But
I appreciate that.
There are some investigative techniques that I don't want to give away.
Yeah.
That we use. Because I'll actually have victims come in and say, I know there's not anything you can do, but I want you to know about this person.
That's exactly what I would say. Straight up, that's exactly what I'd say to you. And I say his first name, I don't give a fuck. Yeah. But like about Adam, the main abuser, there were many, but the main one, it's like many years, decades have passed.
Do you remember?
And I know there's not a thing you can do, and I don't have a video. I don't have.
Wait, do you remember what I had you do and record?
No, I don't. I'm sure I blocked it out.
Yeah. I had you confront him.
Really? Oh my God, this is fascinating. I must have blocked it out.
We taped it.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And we sent it back. But there was a big time delay on it. And the local law enforcement said, one, we don't accept tapes like this because we don't live in California. And two, that it was too long to
statute. Is it statute of limitation or statute of
limitations?
Yeah. I did have a faint memory of that I knew that passed in the state of Illinois, But isn't that interesting how I blocked out?
It was tough.
Did he admit to it?
You fought me on it. You fought me on it.
I'm sure I did. Did he admit to it?
Yes, he did. You would think if he was confronted. Well, first of all, if he was confronted, you think he would deny. But when you turn it around and say, some of those were the best times of my life, which is bullshit, what is he going to do?
Agree.
Of course he's going to agree, because she did like it. She really did like it.
Wow. This is for any of you guys who don't remember stuff from your childhood, but you think shit happened, whether it's sexual abuse or some other trauma, you're hearing in real time truly what the human mind does as someone who has PTSD. We literally can block stuff out and what will happen is this will still slowly, I'll start thawing out on this and have memories. I really appreciate you reminding me of this. I have a faint memory. It's almost like it's so far back in my brain.
Some people, it's really hard. And for you, it was extremely hard. And it was something you did not want to do. And it's not that I forced you to do it, but you agreed to do it. And if you remember, I was sitting on your couch writing what to say.
No, honestly, I don't. I believe you. I don't remember, but the more we're talking about it, it's almost like the ice is melting in my brain. So what do you remember what else we got him to say at all?
I don't remember the exact things, but there was definitely an admission and no denials. And there wasn't a problem. You did a really excellent job.
Thank you.
When the admissions came, you went down this hole of it became so much more real all of a sudden after spending so many years of trying to not make it real. And that's, in a way, can be helpful and in a way can be damaging.
It's so true, because if there's stories we can make up around people and things that have occurred in our lives. And one of the stories that I had is that because I believe he was like 21 or 22 and I was 11 when it started. So it wasn't like some 45-year-old man or so I was like, maybe he got confused and I was so over sexualized because of how my mom dressed me and being a childhood mom.
That's the other word. I don't want my mom to know I know all of these things and know that she was involved.
That was really it. That was the real deal. And when someone admits they did it, now I can't say maybe he didn't really know what he was doing or he thought it was okay. Almost, I can't say it anymore.
Those are self-protectors.
Right.
Yeah. And here's a question, and I've said this to you 100 times, and I say it to a lot of victims, but the fact that there has to become a point where this person loses the control of you being a victim. And you have to be the one to make sure that they understand that you're no longer a victim, that they don't have that victim control that's lifelong.
That's part of what motivated me with the podcast. And granted, I have a lot of different subject matters we cover here, but notice how I say his first name. Yeah. I don't say his last name because I don't want to get sued, but I don't give a fuck.
No.
And it's empowering to do that. It's
empowering to you to do that. And I'm very proud of you to do that.
Thank you.
It's like saying, pardon my French, but fuck you. I'm not your victim.
Right. What would you say to people listening who are where Tiffany was at 20 years ago, who are whatever age they're at, but maybe they've never told anyone else? Maybe this episode has made them go, okay, I know something did happen to me. Because did something happen or didn't it happen? Or they've wanted to maybe address the person or go to the authorities. What would you say to them as someone who has worked with victims who have come to the authorities many years after the incident occurred?
Boy, it depends on each victim, but you got to just remind them that you're still being a victim. And we have to reach a point where you're not a victim anymore. He doesn't have that control over you, because being a victim doesn't mean that you also went through the ordeal that you went through. Is that he has control over you now to stop it from coming out. He has this control over you that you have more to lose by it coming out in some instances.
Are there some cases where you would say it's not recommended or safe to come forward?
No, I haven't. I haven't, because part of that is also a healing process. So I'm part of that healing process too. My end result necessarily may not be the result they want, but they need to know that I'm taking the time and the effort to do this. And I'll give you a couple of just one or two cases that this applied to. So there is a statute of limitations, but the law in California had changed, where if I had independent information, I could proceed. Independent information is a broad statement. It's a real...
It's like, what does that even mean?
Correct. You can come up with all sorts of things. So I just reinterpreted it. Teachers abuse a lot. I don't want to say that generally. I'm just saying I've had a lot of teachers that abuse. And I'll get a student that was abused in middle high school, 7th, 8th grade, that comes back to me when they're 26, 27 years old. Now we're way past the statute back then. And I have what we would say no independent evidence to substantiate this statement. So again, as a healing process, what do we do? And these people their lives is stunted because of this. And they were smart enough to realize that they don't do things in their life that they want to do because of these incidences or once incident. So I'd wire them and have them go to the class right after the bell rang. Say, hey, it's good to see you. I just was in town. I wanted to see you, and shake their hands and sit down and talk. Doors closed, the talking begins. And when confronted with some of the issues, there was either acknowledgement that they occurred or there was no denial, which speaks thousands if you're...
That's an interesting point, because an admission of guilt can also be no denial, not denying it occurred.
So my question always came up in court: you lie to suspects or you do things? Well, sure I do, because if I came up to you and said, you're a fucking child molester, I know you molested some kid, what would you do?
I'd be like, are you fucking crazy? Of course I didn't.
You would do something to verbally or something to deny those.
Right.
Actions. You don't deny them. It speaks words on itself. Or in the least bit concerned that at all. No concern, no change of inflection, no change of conversation. Just that little short pause and a smile. Out of all those teachers, every one of them pled guilty, or they did something else to change their whole entire lives.
Is there any case of that really sticks in your mind to this day that like can haunt you sometimes? Hear Detective Steve's mind-blowing answer to this question next week during part 2 of this exclusive interview. We're also going to cover detecting narcissists and toxic people and other human behavior secrets that Steve has learned and honed this craft over 25 years, interviewing thousands and thousands of people from all different walks of life so that we can see and identify these red flags easier and faster. And plus, he's going to share really great exercise that he has taken me through for the last 2 decades of observing people in public to strengthen this muscle so that we can help prevent more of these people from entering our lives and the lives of those that we love. Reminder, for every written review of this series, I will be donating $25 to Children of the Night. All you have to do is leave a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or both. I will count both reviews, even if it's from the same person. You do not have to leave your name in the review, or you can, whatever you feel more comfortable with. And we will be tallying up those reviews and making the donation. And I will share that donation on my Instagram stories at ProjectME with Tiffany. Please share this episode and encourage someone else or multiple people to leave a review. Even if it's someone who's not super into podcasts, get them to leave a review, because $25 goes a long way in saving children and women from the hands of these evil people and helping them rehabilitate with psychiatric care and much needed, often lifelong medical care that they require. I'm looking forward for you guys to really hear this stuff in part 2. Swipe up to get the resource numbers for the RAINN National Sexual Assault Confidential Hotline, 1-800-656-HOPE. And then Children of the Night also has a hotline. If you're in danger or you think someone else is in danger of being sex trafficked or is currently in a situation, Children of the Night has a 24/7 hotline as well at 1-800-551-1300. Both of those are in the show notes. You can swipe up to access very easily.